welcome to the first session of the last class of School for All Seasons. And I will now, a wonderful cliche, introduce that person who needs no introduction, Dr. Bill Blake.
Glad to see all of you, and I hope you'll be coming back more than this one time. For some reason, our pianist hasn't shown up, and so we're going to have to sing a cappella. Do you think you can do that? I know you can. We always open the history class with a little song. It's on the front page of your, it's at the bottom of the page. Leroy Anderson's Syncopated Clock. Leroy Anderson's Syncopated Clock. Just remember that in the fourth line, but we shall see what cars, and then we shall see. Okay? Don't want to catch anybody going on when they need to stop. Okay? We don't want to catch anybody for that. Okay, hope I can give you the right note. And join me. If you will come along with me, we're going to class to study history. We may not get from A to Z, but we shall see what we shall see. That come with you. Let's do it again. Let's do it again. Maybe I won't catch you this time. Here we go. If you will come along with me, we're going to class to study history. We may not get from A to Z, but we shall see what we shall see. Okay, very good. You did wonderfully. Okay, all right, welcome to the 12th century Renaissance course. I don't know if that's a shock to any of you to hear a course in the Middle Ages called a Renaissance. The third Renaissance, as you know, means rebirth. And so the argument in this course is going to be that there are events that took place in 12th century Western Europe that were more extensive and more precipitous of new things than the later well-known Renaissance. The Renaissance of the 12th century will be very expansive. It will cover many, many countries in Europe. Actually not countries, because the countries haven't arrived yet. There is no Germany, no Italy, no Spain, no nation as yet. The Holy Roman Empire is the big political structure at the time. And anyway, so what's going to happen in the era between 1100 and 1200, you're going to see new things in law, in politics, in religion, in education, in philosophy, in architecture, in art, and in literature, poetry. Just about everything that you think of which belongs to a Renaissance is present in the 12th century. And that's going to be our argument. How many of you remember your life a few years ago in 1999? What were you beginning to think of in 1999, and what were millions of people across at least the world of Greco-Roman Christian civilization? What was on the minds of people as you neared the year 2000?
Y2K.
Everybody was thinking of what the millennium. The millennium in 999, people all over Europe were beginning to get pretty fearful of what was coming. And then as you got nearer to the year 1000, people began all kinds of outrageous, what I guess I would call it, they would not call it, outrageous behavior. I mean, people they began to beat themselves, they said more prayers, they built more churches, they went on more pilgrimages, they did all kinds of religious things. And so in 1099, people were fearful of what was going to happen. The millennium, the end of the world, the coming of Christ, the judgment, and all those things. Well, it didn't change a whole lot in 1999 because people around the world are all kinds of strange behaviors around the world as people prepared for what they thought was the millennium. It didn't come 1,000, maybe it'll come in the year 2000. Now, when I say we're going to look at the 12th century Renaissance, that means that it's in the Middle Ages. And what do you mean by the Middle Ages? Where did the word come from? Who coined it and why? Well, the first usage of it that I can find anywhere in literature is in a writer by the name of Flavio Biondo, Flavia and Lavio, Flavio Biondo, Flavio Biondo, who lived in the Italian Renaissance. He died in, I think, about 1535, something like that, and was born in the late 15th century, 1480 something. Flavio Biondo, in his historical work called The Decades, Decades, The Decades, he takes Petrarch, who is sometimes thought of as the father of the Italian Renaissance, the great poet, the great writer. Petrarch had been very critical of the preceding 1,000 years, that is, from the collapse of the Roman Empire until the 14th century. He was very disdainful of those years. He never called it anything, but he made it very clear in his writings, his letters, his poems, the concentration of his own life. That is, it was on classical Greece and Rome, and particularly Latin literature, Cicero, the great Cicero writer. And anyway, in his writing, he made it clear that he was very disdainful of the preceding thousand years. And Flavio Biondo, reading Petrarch's works, was very critical of Petrarch, saying that he had made a very big mistake by downgrading that period between the collapse of the Roman Empire and the beginning of what's called the Italian Renaissance. And so that's where, he in his writing, in his Decades, he says that Petrarch was disdainful of the Middle Ages. And so that's our first reference to the Middle Ages. Middle Ages is one of the kindest things you can say about that 1,000 years, actually. It really has gotten a very bad press. One of the reasons it's gotten a bad press is because the Italian Renaissance has become it became the more popular, and most people were convinced that well, there was nothing to compare to the Italian Renaissance, and so the years passed. The 18th century Enlightenment was disdainful of the Middle Ages. The Reformation, the Protestants, were disdainful because Catholics, Roman Catholics, dominated that 1,000-year period. And the 18th century Enlightenment also was very critical, ignored the Middle Ages, tended to celebrate the Italian Renaissance and then skip over the 1,000 years between that and ancient Rome and ancient Greece. But in 1860, a Swiss historian by the name of Jacob Burckhardt wrote a book entitled The Civilization of the Renaissance in Italy. The Civilization of the Renaissance in Italy. And in that book, he argues that what happened in the Italian Renaissance was, and I quote, the rediscovery of the world and of man. And man, of course, in this case, is humankind. But what happened in the Italian Renaissance, to denominate it from the preceding 1,000 years, is that the people in the Italian Renaissance rediscovered the world, this world that you and I live in, the here and now, or the here and now as it was in them in the 14th through 16th century. And that the preceding 1,000 years, he said, was an era of faith, illusion, and childish prepossession. That's a pretty, you'd hate to write a book and a person were to review it and say of it that it was faith, illusion, and childish prepossession. Can you imagine making an argument that for 1,000 years this is the way life was like? I mean, really, just on the surface of it, you've got to say, that can't be so. You can't pass 1,000 years of humankind with all the feeling and saying and doing and experiencing and say that 1,000 years passed and there was nothing notable, there was nothing worth celebrating. And in 1928, for the first time, what was despised of the Middle Ages will be rehabilitated by a Yale historian whose name was Charles Homer Haskins. Charles Homer Haskins. His name is in your syllabus, so you don't have to write that down. Charles Homer Haskins wrote a book, the name of which I've taken for my own course, for this course. He wrote a book entitled The 12th Century Renaissance. The 12th Century Renaissance. And it's in that book that he will argue convincingly, certainly convinced me and convinced many, many other people that the Middle Ages was truly a wonderful period, particularly the 12th century. And Haskins will argue that in that 1 century, there were more new things that came about and more things that were reborn in that year than one can possibly imagine. So that's a little historical background of the Middle Ages and a reason why, even to this day, people, if they want to scorn some behavior that's going on now, they will call it what? Medieval. A medieval way of doing things. Well, I will show you in this course that if your thinking can match the thinking of some of the people I'm going to present to you in these lectures, then I'll be very surprised. I mean, when you hear of people like Anselm and Abelard and Bernard of Clairvaux and John of Salisbury, and all these famous 12th century people, and you compare your thought processes, your thinking, your ability to put life together in some kind of compass, I'll be surprised that you can match. I mean, I know I can't match what the level of intellectual achievement these people make. I really, in order to encapsulate this view of the Middle Ages that was held so long, I've written a little ditty. Again, the rest of my pianists, and so we have to do it off the color. But if you'll turn to the second page of your book, let me sit down a minute. The only thing about these ditties is I borrow tunes from, and I don't want to say, for instance, a tune to the song this ditty that I've written to try to explain in kind of doggerel the whole idea of the way people have looked at the Middle Ages and the way I'm going to try to show you it actually was. But anyway, when you go to church, or wherever you might hear this, and you hear the Navy hymn song, I hope that this ditty doesn't ruin it completely for you. Because it has for me. I mean, I can't sing Eternal Father Strong to Save anymore without getting in a few of my crazy lines in the song. I write these songs. Some people may say, particularly you more serious-minded people out there, well, all of you serious-minded, but some of you will look at some of this crazy stuff I do and say, we don't need that kind of stuff. I mean, give us. We came here to learn history, and you give us these crazy songs. But the fact of the matter is, these songs might be crazy, but they are historically accurate. And the reason I've done them for years, I used to do this in the classes I taught at VCU. I used to put history in versified poems and pick up some tune and sing the songs to the students, have the students learn them. Because actually one of the best ways for them to prepare for final exam is to learn the songs that we sung. So let's take a look at this one now. Let's do the tune. Let's sing all three stanzas, okay? I'm really sorry that Nancy, when we went to all that work to uncover the piano and pull it out, and I know Nancy Payne is my pianist, but she, for some reason, I haven't heard from her today. Okay, so we're going to sing to the tune of Eternal Father, Strong to Save. Everybody know that? Okay, here we go. Middle Ages, don't you see, are often lacking clarity. There's some would say, why all the fuss, or something you say, Latinus. They call them dark, they call them dirty, diary of soul calls them dirty.
Here's Nancy.
All right, our pianist is here, and it'll sound better if she plays the song for us.
It sounded wonderful, and I apologize. I had so much musical pressure this weekend that I was responsible for, and I completely forgot that this was today.
Oh.
I really am sorry. But that sounded great. That will sound good.
Okay, we're singing the 12th century Renaissance theme song, one of them. Okay, can you get set up quickly? The pianist is Nancy Payne. I think most of you know Nancy. Nancy has been playing the piano for religious services here, and she's been playing the piano for just about every thing that I do in terms of these crazy little ditties that I attempt to write. Well, look at the, I think maybe I found up on the last two lines about they call them dark, they call them dirty, nary no soul has called them dirty, okay? And then the second stanza, I don't think, I mean, you have to kind of cheat a little bit on the lines, you know, to make everything fit, but I think it's worth the effort. Okay? We're on the second, we're going to do the second and third stanzas. You can go ahead and play a line for us. Okay, you ready? All right, here we go, second verse, okay? But let's be fair to this dark time and find the truth so it will provide. You may learn they never made, nor were they ever well behaved. I'll give you that, but keep in mind the our fault. Let's do the last stanza one more time, okay? Now you have gathered here today your fears and ignorance to away. But when you go back in the hall, this you will say to one and all. All things be like finally speak about them much more kindly. Okay, thank you very much. I hope that will help you to remember what I just told you about the historiography of the 12th century. Now, get back to the 12th century. I read in a history book one time that you can do things that are historically true, but you can do it from a kind of an imaginary figure. And so Norman Cantor gave me the idea of doing this. I want to try to set the scene for everything that's going to happen in the rest of our course by following a Yorkshire monk from a Benedictine monastery, a Benedictine abbey in that northeastern part of England. So what I want to do now is and we'll talk about places on this monk's travel that all of you or most of you will have been. You'll have been to that place, but when you were there, it would be very, very different from the way in which it was in the 12th century when that monk made his travel south. Well, why was he making this travel south? What was this monk intending to do? Well, his abbot had some business that he wanted to transact in Rome. And he chose this particular monk to go on that journey and to transact the business for him. Two things he wanted to accomplish. One is a new pope had just taken his position in Rome in the year 1049, and that pope's name was Leo IX. Pope Leo IX has become pope in 1049. And one of the things that the abbot wanted to do was to send greetings to him from this Benedictine monastery in Yorkshire. And so he went to the place where the monks were copying books, and he selected one of them, and he said, here's what I'd like for you to do. I'd like for you to go to Rome this. And the second thing I want you to do, I need to get an annulment of a marriage between a cousin of mine, one of the great Anglo-Saxon earls, and we need a papal dispensation for that. And so I'd like for you to send greetings to the new pope, and I'd like for you to seek to get this annulment going for my cousin. And so the Yorkshire monk headed out. Well, pretty rough going south at that time. He passed monasteries and abbeys and churches that were utterly destroyed by the Viking invasions along the English coast, and completely ravished this place. And it was deserted, it was ruins everywhere, but he made his way southward toward Rome. Finally got down to the city of Canterbury. And Canterbury was a very busy place. King Edward I was a deeply religious, deeply pious man. In fact, there were any number of people at that time who thought that he ought to be in a monastery, an abbey, rather than being in royalty and leading people. And the monk, it didn't take him long to look at how disdainful many of the Anglo-Saxon knights word of this king, because he spent most of his time in prayer and in devotions and in meditation and very pious kinds of activities. He was called Edward the Confessor, which tells you that he spent a great deal of time confessing his sins to the priest, all the evil things that he'd done and getting absolution for them. And so you can imagine how rough Anglo-Saxon knights would look at a man who's supposed to lead them into battle when he was spending most of his time kneeling in prayer in the churches. Well, the Canterbury Cathedral was just getting started at that time. Brand new stones being laid for the new church, and as you might have, as the monk might have expected, what Edward I was busy doing in the new Anglo-Saxon church, new Canterbury church. The church is St. Mary's is the name of Christ Church, rather. Christ Church is the name of the cathedral at Canterbury. Still called Christ Church in Canterbury. Edward was busy installing relics, that is, bones and hair and fingernails and various pieces of various pious and what were called saintly people. Misuse of the word saint, I think, but be that as it may. Saintly people in reliquaries in his new cathedral. And so the monk was a little awed by all that was going on in Canterbury, and he was really glad to be able to get on his journey, and so he was able to get a boat going across the channel and came to Normandy. When he got to Normandy, he found himself in a very different situation. Instead of the kinds of fractured culture that he found in Anglo-Saxon England, he found a very tightly political structure in Normandy. Still medieval, still feudal, but one of the dukes of Normandy had put things together so tightly that society was strong, and the monk was shocked at the contrast between the fragmentary situation in England, in southern England, and the very tight political structure that he found in Normandy. The leader of Normandy, as you know, is going to become famous about 26 some years later. Of course, he's known as William the Bastard. I'm always puzzled by these names. There are a whole series of Charles with names, well as a Pepin. The followers of Charlemagne, there was a Pepin the Short, there was a Charles the Bald, there was a Charles the Simple, there was a Louis the Stammerer, and I've always wondered if anybody ever walked up to them and said, "Hello, Charles the Bald." How you doing, Louis the Stammerer? It just kind of boggles me. And surely, I mean, you didn't dare go up and say, "Hello, William the Bastard." William Duke of Normandy now, a powerful political and military figure, and he has united the Normandy, and within, as I say, 26 years, he's going to take his knights across the channel, and he is going to defeat Harold, and England will become not Anglo-Saxon but Norman England, and people are going to learn to speak French instead of the Anglo-Saxon dialect that they were speaking before. In fact, it won't be maybe a century or two until it wasn't until the time of Chaucer that anything even comparable to the old Anglo-Saxon is being spoken in England, because the Norman French has become to dominate the culture in Normandy. But anyway, Normandy was tightly in place, and he was really impressed by that. He also bumped into some monks or some chaplains who had gone with some Normans to southern Italy and to accompany them, to be their confessors, to offer prayers on their behalf as they fought in southern Italy and Sicily to gain territory for the Normans in that territory. In fact, they were so successful that southern Italy and Sicily became known by the 12th century as the Norman southern Italy and Sicily. And they told this Yorkshire monk about life in the Mediterranean, told them about the Muslims and people who had a religion based upon the teachings of Muhammad. And also he learned about the wrong-headed religious people called the Byzantines, the Eastern Orthodox Christians, whose religion was very different from the Roman Catholic Christianity that this monk was a part of. And all these things kind of boggled his mind. And he was in a hurry to get away from Normandy. And he decided, instead of going directly south, because there were a lot of warfare going on, knights fighting knights, because the major warfare had ended. In fact, by the year 1000, for the first time in at least 500 years, Western Europe was enjoying peace. No more Angles, no more Viking attacks, no more attacks by the Germanic tribes, the Visigoths and Ostrogoths and Vandals, no more attacks from the east by the Magyars and the Slavs and the Avars. For the first time, Western Europe was enjoying a time of peace from external invasion. And that enabled people to do things that they hadn't been doing for many years before, in terms of thinking, in terms of working things out, in terms of putting together new buildings and so on. So it's very important. The population in Western Europe doubled between 1000 and 1300, from 30 million to 60 million people, and all of this having to do with peace, no more invasions, and of course, once you have the surge in population, you need more food, and so you need agriculture begins to develop. All of these things help to bring about the 12th century Renaissance. Getting back to our monk, instead of going south, he right away he goes east. He goes into what we now know as Belgium, but then people call it Flanders. Names like Bruges and Ypres and Brussels, these are the areas in Flanders. And here he found something that he had not found either in Anglo-Saxon England or in Normandy. He found a totally new class of people. In fact, it had not even been determined to be a class. It was kind of a group of people who were in sort of economic no man's land, or no person's land, I guess you could say. And they came to be known as the bourgeois people, urban people, people who were merchants and people who engaged in various industrial activities, particularly the manufacture of woolen cloth. Was made in Flanders, and that woolen cloth was carried by merchants to various areas, and the craftsmen made the cloth, or processed the cloth there, and he saw that they were taken. Some of this cloth was taken to fairs in the Flanders. Fairs, F-A-I-R-S, is like the fair that's just started in Virginia, up Route 95. The fairs were international centers where people from all over Western Europe and even from the East would come and exchange goods. They were very important centers, important in the shaping of the towns and the cities which will emerge. One of the cutting-edge developments that show us the vigor of the 12th century, the rise of the cities, our rise of urban communities, and that's what's taking place in Flanders and what this monk is experiencing. And he is amazed at all of the sights and sounds of industry and commerce that he's seeing. And noting that these people, he said, I've heard of the three categories of people in our society. That is, people who pray, people who work, and people who fight. Those three classes I know well. What are we to call these people who buy and sell and seek to want to even make some profit? So the church says that you shouldn't do that. And people wanting to invest money in order to make more money. This is all brand, and I'm beginning to see gold and silver coins. My goodness, he says, what in the world is happening here? And so he's kind of anxious to leave Flanders because this is all very, very strange to him. And so he heads down to Paris. And he wants to go to Paris because several things. One of the main things he wants to do in Paris is to see the Abbey of Saint-Denis. That's S-T-D-E-N-Y-S. It looks like St. Denis. The Abbey of Saint-Denis. All of the royal regalia is in this church. That is to say, all the kings who died, the burial places are in that church. And as we move on in this course, we're going to come back to the Abbey of Saint-Denis, and we're going to look at one of the abbots there and what happens in the 12th century to that church, that famous church. But of course, that's 100 years away from this monk's visit to the Abbey around 1050. So he stays there for a while, but one of the things he notices about the monarchy there is that the king stays in a small area along the Seine and doesn't leave it in a walled area. And outside of that are the castles of the big French robber barons. And the king dares not go out because he fears being attacked by one of the robber barons outside. And again, all these things are so new to this monk. He goes on southward. One of the monks of the Abbey of Saint-Denis says, don't miss the big church at Cluny, C-L-U-N-Y, the church at Cluny. Have any of you ever been to Cluny, and have you ever seen, some of you have, and you've seen the tremendously tall and impressive buildings that still remain there from that abbey. It was founded in 910 by a layman, a very pious layman, but it became one of the most famous monasteries, the most famous monastery in Europe, the Abbey of Cluny. It was the finest structure, made of the finest materials. It had the most sophisticated liturgy. The monks lived very high. Not much fasting, good food and wine on the table. I mean, it was a place for a sophisticated monk to be in the second half of the 11th, beginning of the 12th century. The Abbey of Cluny. Most of the monasteries in Western Europe were very happy with that kind of monastery. Some of them were critical of it and thought that the monks there were abandoning the kind of simple life, the kind of self-denying life that a monk is supposed to live. But the monks from Cluny were sought by emperors and kings all over Europe because of their intelligence, because of their education, because of their ability to help them in administration and in legal matters. And so Saint-Denis and the monarchies of Europe worked hand in glove. There was no rivalry between church and state. The state was on the more powerful side. The monks were kind of seen as aids to the political structure. And well, he spent some time in Cluny, and then he headed on over. He had to go through the Alpine passes. He had to get guides to help him negotiate the treacherous pathways through the Alps, and came to the most famous northern Italian city oh my goodness. The most famous Italian city was the great cathedral at Milan. Okay, they come to the city of Milan, and there he found a culture, urban culture, similar to the one that he found up in Flanders. Here was an industrial proletariat really thriving in that city, and really complaining about how they were being put upon by the mercantile people. They need us, the craftsmen in northern Italy said. The people who built walls, built churches, built cathedrals, built houses. I mean, they said we're needed. They had their craft guilds. The merchants had their mercantile guilds. And the merchants always thought of themselves as higher and nobler and more powerful and more worthy than the industrial class. And so there was a thriving conflict going on in the city of Milan. He was really kind of hopeful of getting out of there pretty quickly, and he did finally made his way down the mountains and finally came to the city of Rome. Well, if you're thinking that when he came to the city of Rome he's going to find great splendor, you would be very, very disappointed in the period between 1050 and 1100 leading up to the 12th century Renaissance. You would have found suburban areas that had decayed back in Roman times. You would have found streets that were filthy and dirty and just an awful place. About the only place that really was worth seeing was the Vatican in Rome. And so he makes his way to the Vatican. Word had come that the monk was on his way, and finally arrived there. Took a long time to go. He only made about 30 miles a day in those days traveling. And just to get from, say, Yorkshire, the abbot Yorkshire to Canterbury, took 9 days, about 265 miles from Yorkshire to Canterbury. And so at 30 miles a day, it took about 8 or 9 days for the monk to make his way. And that's if he had no trouble. But you never know when you're going to be beset by some highway robber who might attempt to take away your goods. Don't we say that somewhere? I think that's another song I've got. Let's turn to your last page. We're almost done today. But the first song on page the last page that you have is to the tune of "In Old New York" by Victor Herbert. You know that song? Well, Nancy, I think will play it so you can remember it, and we'll sing the verse first about the monk that I just talked about. The first stanza on page 3 entitled "Song of the 12th Century Renaissance." The tune is to "In Old New York" by Victor Herbert. You want to play that for us?
Get my other glasses on. Next time I'll be more prepared.
Okay. All right. Don't sing yet. You got unseized in Gay County, in London, or in Cork. The weeds you'll meet on any street in old New York. And only you won't find those verbs on your book, that's from the original song. In old New York, in old New York, in old New York, the beach crops always fly. They're sweet and fair, and on the square, the maids of Manhattan will lie. Well, that's the original song, but that's the tune for this one. So, all right, well, we sing different words, and we're going to sing about the month that I just talked to you about. Okay? Here we go. Among the Yorkshire sun, it was a perilous trip. He learned and almost every turn to see if your good thing was strip. His mission was to go to Rome, bring greetings to the Pope, then go back to his English home, from Rome to Rome. All right, now really good. So let's do that one more time. You sang that so well. But sing it out this time, and we'll stop. I'll let you go home after you finish the song. Here we go. Yorkshire and south, it was a perilous trip. He learned at almost every turn to see if your good thing would strip. His mission was to go to Rome, bring greetings to the Pope, and go back to his English home, rough road to Rome. All right, that's it for today. I shall see you next time, and we'll really zero in on the great things that happened in the 12th century. Thanks so much for coming. Come back again.